So let me ask for a couple questions from the audience. And here we got James Clarkson.
This is a fascinating theory, and you've really got my mental wheels turning. The only thing that pops into my head is if I look at Roswell and I take out the extraterrestrial explanation and I add to it all of the work that's been done to interview somewhere around 600 witnesses, I have to come up with a government operation by agencies that are so totally out of control that they're willing to use innocent American citizens for kidnapping and intimidation just on the possibility that they might trap some Soviet agents. I really like the extraterrestrial crash disk, we don't know what we're doing, so we're just going to be quiet about it hypothesis much better. But I just wanted, I guess the question in all of that is, doesn't that make Roswell a really frightening event if you pull out extraterrestrials and flying discs, and this is just all done to fool the public or to get Soviet spies?
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. All right. My viewpoint is that deception on this scale, along the same lines of what happened during World War II, I think they were short-term in their projections, and they didn't realize it was going to carry on for this long. And I think what we're seeing now is that there is no way to go back and to explain to the American public how they have been deceived for 60 years. If you remember the Manhattan Project, once we blew the atomic bomb, we came out with a Smythe report right away that says, folks, we deceived you. We built these big cities at Hanover Plant, at the Tennessee Valley Authority, under the nose of your governor. We didn't tell the vice president about it. We did it because of the war effort. Will you forgive us? And of course the American population said, yes, of course we will. It was for the war effort. How do you explain to the American people 60 years later that they have been deceived for 60 years?
That's a great question. We have another question here from...
Yes, Alexandre Duplay from France. I cannot agree with what you've said about the lack of interest in 1947. Just first of all, if you look at the so famous Twining memo, I mean, it's obvious that there is a tremendous interest. There is obviously, and there was, as you said, a tremendous interest of what was happening in Sweden. And if you go to College Park, you will find in the ONI record group some documents that are absolutely undisputable because they are available to everyone. And there is one very interesting document, which is a listing of all the cases that had taken place during that period, 47 to 49, and you see that they take these cases very seriously. So you don't find Roswell in the list, but you find all kinds of other observations above the military bases. So that I cannot really buy. But I accept the fact that counterintelligence could have been involved to track ufologists and to see what would be the potential interest by the Russians. And you obviously know, because it's well known also, and it has been published in Russia, I think, at the end of the Soviet Union, the fact that the Russians indeed had showed an interest for Roswell, and the story, I think, by Korolev, that Korolev had been asked to give his opinion to Stalin on this topic.
And sure, and again, I'm not advocating that all the activity that was happening in 1947 around flying discs were fabricated. As I stated, there could very well have been real flying saucers flying around our atmosphere, but that did not preclude the intelligent folks within the Central Intelligence Group and within counterintelligence from taking advantage of it.
Can we get another question from Chuck Wade? You want to move away from the mic, the speaker? Step forward.
Sir. Ooh, damn. It did. My name is Chuck Wade. I was born and raised in Corona, New Mexico. Whenever Mac Brazel found that craft on the Foster Ranch, he came to Corona to get my father to go out to see it. Is that in your book or your thoughts? Also, folks, I hold in my hand metal from the UFO that crashed on the plains of San Augustine in July 1947. On the 24th of this month, Mr. Gerald Anderson was a speaker at the UFO conference I held in Gallup, New Mexico. Mr. Anderson was a eyewitness as a 5-year-old child to that craft crashed there. He told very specifically about being a child, seeing the craft, seeing the dead bodies, and here came the military and run them off. Folks, I have no idea where this gentleman gets his stuff, but I'll tell you what, I have studied this for years, and I also gave you a brown package in Roswell on the 4th or 5th of July. Did you read it?
I did.
Okay. And you still say that it didn't happen? Sir, I don't know where you're coming from, but I guarantee you, I don't agree.
I should clarify. I never said it didn't happen. What I'm saying is that if this is a grand deception operation, that if it's an operation on the same scale of pushing a dead body out of a submarine to try to convince the Germans that we were going to attack from a different area, we could very well have staged anything. And if you keep the information quiet and only privy to a certain small group, then the folks underneath you, right, if you can convince them that something's occurring that's possibly extraterrestrial, you can definitely convince your enemy of that.
And I agree with James that the notion of disinformation and psychological warfare is definitely weaved into the field of ufology. And it's weaved into not only the Roswell crash, it's weaved into other crashes and stories. It's sort of part of the conundrum or ambiguity that we have to live with in this complicated field. I think I'd like to, you want to take another question?
Sure,
Or?
I'd be happy
Okay.
to.
Well, let's go to Tom Whitmore here in the back.
James, the material is very interesting, but one thing occurred to me that's a possible kink in the logic here, and that is after over 60 years of UFO history, it seems logical to us to use UFOs or flying saucers in a deception operation. And you gave a very graphic example of putting the Kenneth Arnold story, or they put the Kenneth Arnold story next to the secret weapons story. But the flying saucer UFO phenomenon didn't exist at that time. So it seems to me very unlikely that even a highly intelligent group of psychological warfare experts would be creative enough to come up with a modern UFO phenomenon as a deception operation when it didn't even exist yet.
It's a comment.
That was a comment,
All
yeah.
right.
You want to comment back?
No comment.
Okay.